with Christians Engaged. I'm the president of this statewide nonprofit Christian ministry engaging Christians in the political realm. Our heart is to call the body of Christ to do three things: to pray for our elected officials and government leaders, to pray for our nation, our city, and our state, to vote in every election, to be light and salt at the polling place, and to engage in our culture and really follow God and the heartbeat of God for our life as it relates to whatever he's called us to do within the culture, to get politically educated and in some form do some sort of political activism. We believe the body of Christ is called in this hour to be a voice, and we have to stand up in whatever God's called us to do and whatever his word says. So with that, I have got a very special guest with us today, and this is only our second podcast. So we're really excited to have our one of our advisory board members, State Representative Matt Krause from Tarrant County. Matt, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on here. You know, I love what y'all are doing, and excited and honored to be on the advisory board, and excited to be with you here today on this podcast.
Well, we're really excited. I love your background of the Texas Capitol. It's always such a beautiful building, and what an amazing honor it must be. Is it an amazing honor to serve there and to walk into those doors every day?
Yeah, it's really kind of surreal to think I've got an office in this building. I get to be here and, represent some of the best people in Texas every 2 years, 140 days in that chamber. So it is kind of surreal. I remember going on a field trip when I guess it was like 6th or 7th grade and looking in the chamber and saying, man, I would love to work here one day. And now getting to work in the chamber as a representative and have one of those desks with your name on it. It's pretty incredible and just such an honor and a blessing that the Lord's allowed me to do it.
Well, Matt, we just really appreciate your commitment to Jesus, your commitment to your family, and to the state of Texas. And why don't you just start from the beginning just a little bit? Give us a couple minutes of just your beginning story, and then I want to talk about your family heritage and what that looks like to be a Christian in politics.
Yeah, I was very blessed. Kind of hit the family jackpot, being born into a home with two parents who loved me. My dad was a youth pastor when I was born out in East Texas, in Tyler, Texas. He was a youth pastor of a church called Green Acres Baptist, big church, great church. And so he did that for a while, and then he became a senior pastor at a church in White House, Texas. And then San Antonio, when I was about 5 or 6, got a church in there. So that's where I grew up. I grew up in San Antonio. And my dad's a pastor. Both my grandfathers are pastors. My great-grandfather was a pastor. My brother's a pastor. So pretty much everybody in our family is in the ministry. And I said, Dad, how do I know if I'm supposed to go into the ministry? And I was probably 12 or 13. And he said, you know what, if you can think of anything else you'd rather do that. And I thought, oh, that's pretty simple. So what do I want to do? And I was always fascinated with the founding fathers, with the Constitution, with the War for Independence and all that. So I thought, you know what, I want to go something maybe history, politics, and went off to college in San Diego, and about my junior year, I really felt like the Lord was saying politics is the route you go into. So thought, okay, what do politicians do? Well, it seems like they're all lawyers, so I guess I better go to law school. So I was privileged to be part of the first class that graduated from Liberty University's School of Law in 2007. Came back to Texas after that and did constitutional law for 5 years, defending pro-life issues, religious liberty, things like that, and did that for 5 years until I won my primary. So that was kind of my quick path there. Just always felt like the Lord was calling me into this arena. Didn't kind of know how, when, or where, but it was something that was always on my heart, and just kind of kept pursuing that. And the Lord opened doors, and blessed to now be here in my 4th term in the Texas House, serving the people of House District 93 and all of Texas.
That's an amazing story. One of my favorite people of history is William Wilberforce, how he got born again and became a follower of Jesus even as he served in the British legislature, and how he made such an incredible impact on the country of England, the nation of England. So, I mean, from your family background, what are some of the values that you took from that ministry family into the political realm? I'm fascinated by that.
That's right. Yeah. And I love William Wilberforce as well. The movie Amazing Grace. If the listeners haven't seen it, they should. It's one of my top 3 all-time movies. It's just, I love, there was that point in the movie where he says, do I follow my ministry for God, or do I serve in politics? one of the guys says, we'll do both, because it is really a ministry. And I think that's what my parents really instilled in me. My dad, a couple years after that first piece of great advice, said everybody has a pulpit, sometimes not just in a church. So he was always saying, it doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing. You don't have to be called into full-time ministry to hopefully advance the kingdom and enrich the culture. So wherever you're put, wherever your passions go, that should be one of your aims. And so that was always drilled into us as kids, is that no matter what the Lord has for you, he's given you certain desires and certain passions for a reason. You follow those, and then you find out how you can be salt and light in the culture wherever he's put you. And so he was always great there. I remember on 4th of July, when everybody's having barbecues, we would read the Declaration of Independence. We didn't use it as a barbecue day necessarily, as a day to remember what our country was founded on and the principles that it was founded on. I always appreciated that. Parents gave me a love of country, a love of voting, a love of being involved. And so I always appreciated that as well. So, and my dad being a pastor, having a godly character and having integrity were always the two most important things to him for a person in their life. He didn't care if we were rich. He didn't care what jobs we had. He didn't care about anything, as long as we knew Jesus, followed Jesus, and lived our lives trying to live with character and integrity. That's what he cared about. And so those are pretty good life lessons for a kid. And as long as you strive to do those things, you're so much better off.
That's so good. I'm a PK too. I grew up in a ministry family. My dad was a pastor for 25 years. So I think there's something with the PKs. We realize that it's not all flash and lights, right? There's a whole bunch of ugliness and mundane things in ministry life. And so how do you translate that to your life in politics? I mean, you've got committee hearings you have to sit on. You've got, fundraising goals you have to do as a candidate. There's all these mundane tasks that you're like, oh, this has nothing to do with ministry or sharing the gospel or impacting the unborn or whatever. How do you work through that in your daily life and realize that all those pieces make a difference to the big picture?
That's right. Well, and as you know better than anybody, you've been involved in this arena for such a long time in many facets of this political sphere, that if you don't do some of the little things well, you'll never get to do many of the big things well. And that's a biblical concept as well. And so there's another verse that says, do everything you do to the glory of God. And so even then, when some things are mundane or seem tedious, or you don't really want to do that, you look at it and say, okay, this is what you have to do to be able to make an impact. If you hadn't done all those meet and greets, door knocking, fundraising, had all those constituent meetings, you never would have been in a place to be on the House floor. For me, one of the biggest honors I've had is the pro-life bill we passed my first session that has saved literally tens of thousands of lives here in Texas. But you never get that seat on the House floor to push that button to make that vote if you haven't done all the little things beforehand. So I think that, and my parents were always big on that as well, is you got to do the little things well, even when nobody's watching, because only when you do the little things well can you do the big things that have that platform to do kind of showy, flashy things. But you've got to put in the work first beforehand. So that's always in the forefront of my mind.
That's so good. I know me as a political consultant and campaign manager, and even as a candidate, oh, that was an amazing venture. But anyway, I just, the things I value are the little conversations I've had with people that have been able to speak life into them. And that took, many tasks and many mundane things to get that kind of trust and belief in me that I could sow into their life. And so what you're doing is so important, Matt. So thank you so much for your service. You love to talk about the Constitution, the founding fathers, and you've worked with wall builders. And so what do you think every believer in Texas needs to understand about the formation of our nation and how that should impact their life today?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think that's one that we're missing on so many different levels in society. But if you commit to doing it in your home, then we can start home by home, rebuilding that foundation and that framework. To me, one of the biggest things is that our founding fathers gave us a system of ordered liberty. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't anarchy. It wasn't everybody for themselves. They understood that if you want to truly have a limited government with the maximum amount of freedoms and liberties, that you had to control yourself internally. And so I think what we're missing a lot today is people say, well, I don't have to, I'm just going from one passion to the next. Whatever feels good, do it. If it feels right to me, that's what I'm going to do. But our founding fathers understood that if you don't police yourself internally, then government's going to have to grow and expand larger and larger to do that for you. And we're seeing even some of this with the pandemic. Elected officials and others say, hey, please be personally responsible, do this, do that. After a couple of weeks of people not being personally responsible, they feel like they need to come in and take more drastic measures. And so I think we've really lost that in society and culture, the fact that, hey, you're going to have to restrain yourself a little bit. It's going to take some self-discipline. You're not going to be able to do as many things as maybe you wanted to do or the ways you wanted to do it. But by putting some of those restraints on yourselves internally, you free up government from having to do that externally, which gives us some more limited government, which gives us more freedoms. And so if people understood that relationship more and took it to heart and practiced that, I think we'd all be a lot better off. And the Constitution is kind of the perfect vehicle and document for enshrining that ideology, because it's a very limited government. It's only certain things that the federal government is supposed to do. And it's grown so far outside of its bounds and legitimate bounds because the people haven't policed themselves or have allowed the bigger government to take over. If we truly want to get back to more freedom, more liberty, more limited government, it starts with each and every one of us in our homes controlling ourselves.
Well, and Christians should be the ones that should be championing personal responsibility. We believe in sin, we believe in law and order. And so, we should be the ones that should be thanking God really for the founding of our nation, and what an amazing document that we've been given that has given us so much freedom for so many years. And, we have to keep it, right?
That's right.
As Benjamin Franklin asked.
That's right.
Said, you have a republic if you can keep it. It is our responsibility as believers in this hour to keep it. And
that's exactly right.
So going on to that topic, Matt, there's a ton of things we could talk about, and I could talk to you for 2 hours, I'm sure. But, as it relates to this generation of Christians and the future of Christianity, you could talk many things about that. But what is your deepest concerns when you look at the younger generation? Again, it's not a younger generation. Put us in that, right? We're young.
That's right.
But this generation of Christianity, what are some of the concerns that you see for the future as it relates to our nation?
Oh, yeah. One of the biggest ones for me, biblical illiteracy. And you talk to pastors, youth pastors. My brother was doing some doctoral studies for a while, and he would give surveys to youth group students. And they didn't know the Bible. And these are kids who go to youth group and are in church every week. And so I think the more illiterate we are as Christians in the Bible, the worse off we are. Because then you can, as you always talk about, be that salt and light in the community if you don't know how to be that salt and how to be that light. And I think, unfortunately, we've kind of watered down the gospel a little bit in many places in our country. Some places haven't. I'm blessed to go to a very solid Bible-believing church. But there's other places around this state and this country that don't preach that, just the solid word of God. And so I think for me, the biggest concern as a Christian is the biblical illiteracy I see in some of our culture in our country, which I think can have ruinous effects for many other parts of our culture and society, and that has long-term effects as well.
I so agree. If we don't connect with Jesus, and the first place to connect with Jesus is in his word. If we don't understand his word, we don't understand his character and ways, how are we going to be able to reflect his life to the people around us? So Matt, when you're talking to a young person, you have an intern or you have a page or somebody that you're connecting with that you're talking about getting involved politically as a young person and they're a Christian, what is some of the advice that you give them? Because that's a crazy minefield that you're asking them to embark on.
It really is. And, that's a great question. We always tell them to look for candidates or campaigns that they can really believe in. Don't just work for somebody to get some experience. You really want to believe in the person or kind of the platform of what the person is doing or running for. And then once you find that person, get involved, because you'd be amazed, Bunny, you know this better than anybody, the lack of committed people you have on any campaign at any time. And if you can be a young person who's excited, enthusiastic, and actually working hard for a candidate or a campaign, they will love you and they will use you, and you will get invaluable experience. You'll be able to move up the political campaign ladder faster than you would ever imagined. And so I always encourage them, don't look at, as Paul tells Timothy, don't be afraid of your youth. Don't let anybody look down on you because you're young. Prove yourself, work with diligence, work with excitedness and passion, and do it well. And it's amazing how far you can get in a short amount of time. So we always find people or causes you're passionate about, get involved, show up, be there, and don't think that your youth is a hindrance. It's actually a huge benefit in a lot of ways.
And I like to tell people, don't throw your integrity out the window when you get into politics, right?
That's right.
It's not an excuse to be evil or to backstab or to not be trustworthy. That's ridiculous. So
that's right.
That's not what we're doing here, Christians.
No, and one of my favorite quotes, and I know you are the same way, John Quincy Adams, one of his life mottos was duty is ours, results are God's. And so, yes, like you said, you just do the right things the right way. And if it works out, great. The Lord's put you there for a purpose. If not, he's got something else for you that's even better. I think you would have made an incredible congresswoman and you would have done a great job, but you're actually going to have a 10 times more impact on the culture and the kingdom doing what you're doing now, which you could not have done if you were serving in Washington every week. So the Lord always has reasons for us to do stuff. And even I've lost races before too. And you can't think the Lord is good one day because you think you're going to win and then he's not good the next day. And we tell young people that too. You're not doing it for the result. You're doing it to be faithful to what you believe you're called to do. Do it the right way. The results will take care of themselves. But just like you said, be a person of integrity all the way through.
Amen. Well, that gets us into the next fun question, which is how do those young people pick candidates? You know how many times we have questions from Christians, you know, I'm looking at the presidential race, I'm looking at the governor's race, I'm looking at my state rep. I'm picking between the lesser of two evils here. How do we make those choices when people are not perfect? We're not electing Jesus, right? To go to the White House. I wish we were. But how do we make those choices, Matt? That's really hard for people.
Man, and that is a great question, especially in this day and age with what we're seeing at the federal level and other places. How do you pick? Because like you said, unless Jesus is on the ballot, you're always picking the lesser of two evils. And so I think if you're a young person or somebody looking to get involved in politics, the first thing you do if you want to work for a candidate that's already been in office, look at their record. Because as you and I know, we're here in Texas, red Texas. So everybody who runs in a primary is a conservative, right? A rock rib, just dyed in the wool.
They're conservative.
Yeah, because that's what they'll tell you, every single one. And so, but if they've been in office for a while, they have a voting record. You can kind of see what they've done. So if you're looking to get involved with the campaign of somebody who's already been in office, look over that voting record. See if they've lived up to what they've said. Now, you're not going to agree with everybody. I've been married almost 18 years. And if there's anybody I should agree with 100% of the time, it would be my wife. And so, but we don't. And so we have differences. So I'm always amazed when somebody gets upset that a politician hasn't voted or done something they wanted to 100% of the time, because that's just not human nature. That's just not how things work. So you may have some disagreements. If it's on a big issue like a pro-life issue or religious liberty, that may be a red flag you can't get over. And you look at both candidates. That's how, especially at the federal level, sometimes that I look at it. This person's not perfect. This person's not perfect. But on the issues that I care about and I think are really important, how have they done? And even you look at the party platforms of the two major parties in America. They have the lines could not be any more bright. It's not like one is a little different here or there. They're completely different. So you look at those platforms and say, I may not be a huge fan of this person for this reason or that reason, but what he or she's going to bring to office is going to be 80 or 90% of the time I'm going to agree. Or if I go with this person, even though I may agree with them or how they say things, I'm going to disagree with them about 90% of the time and on some very important issues. And so that may be your deciding factor. And so just look at the people, look at their issues, look at their voting record. And if they haven't been in office before, vet them hard. When I was running for office, I enjoyed those conversations. I'm sure you did as well. Hey, we don't know how you're going to vote. How can you guarantee me that you're going to do what you said you've done? And I love the opportunity to tell them what I believed, why I believed it, and how I'd keep believing it once I got into office. So look at voting records, look at party platforms, and then talk to those people. President, U.S. senators, congressmen, sometimes you can't have those one-on-one conversations, but for your state senators, state reps, city councilmen, school board members, mayors, you can have those one-on-one conversations, and I would encourage you to do so.
I think that's what people don't understand, Matt. They don't understand people are going to Washington, D.C., or they're going to Austin, and there's leadership. There's set leadership within the parties. There's a, expectation you're going to vote certain ways. Yes, you can be a lone voice and you can speak out and vote differently against your party leadership. when you have to as a believer. But in reality, you're still being elected with a label that you're expected to stand up for certain party values, right? And so
That's right.
that is so important, that people look at the party platforms, that they look at the values. What are they saying? And I also encourage people to go to the individual candidates' websites and actually read their issue pages.
That's a great point.
It's amazing what they'll say with their own mouth about what they believe.
That's right.
And you can look and see key words that they're using that you can identify, hey, that might not be what I stand for. So just really do your research, and within 10 minutes, you could have your ballot figured out if you just do that alone. Right. So enough on that. We can talk all day on that issue as
That's
well,
right.
Especially in 2020. So, okay, talk to us. You're on our advisory board. We're so honored to have you putting your name with us, Matt. It really just means the world to us because we believe in you as well. We're doing so many outreach efforts to churches, to Christians on social media. We're writing books, we're writing articles to educate people. I just wrote an article on primary runoffs and the statistics of that and why those are important. Why are you serving with us, and why is Christians Engaged outreach efforts so important right now for Texas, do you think?
Oh yeah, and I really am thrilled with what y'all are doing and the mission and purpose of what y'all are attempting to do. I think you could have far-reaching implications for not only this generation but for future generations to come, because Christians are good a lot of times about complaining about what's going wrong in the culture, but not taking steps to actively remedy it. And so many times I hear people say, well, I don't want to get involved in politics as a Christian because it's kind of dirty, it's kind of tainted. It just doesn't feel good. And I always tell them, well, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. And so no matter if you're involved or not, it's going to have an impact on your life. And if you're not in that public square, if you're not having a say in that, what's going on in your city council or state legislature or Congress, somebody else is taking up that void. And so I think it's so critical what y'all are doing. You're equipping and educating Christians on how to get involved in the process. Because 2 Chronicles 7:14, I know we've talked about it before, doesn't talk about the rest of the nations. It doesn't talk about the elected officials or the judges or whoever it is. It says, if my people are called by my name. So it's up to the Christian community, if they want to see revival in the land, not to put your hope or trust in Washington, D.C. or Austin. You've got to get involved in your community. And so y'all are giving them the tools to do that. A lot of times I think Christians also think, well, I've never done it before, so it's too overwhelming or it's too daunting. I think that's one of the biggest values of what Christians Engaged is doing. You're saying, look, you take these simple, easy steps to be involved in your community and what's going on. You can do these things. And I think people think, oh, I can do that. I can register to vote. I can hand out some information about a candidate. I can do these things. They're really not that daunting or intimidating. And so I think that's one of the biggest things, because as people see they can get involved and it makes a difference, it gets them more and more excited about doing it. And I think it's just going to have a huge snowball effect. And I think you guys are doing something that is just really exciting.
Well, yeah, my story started as a precinct chair, and I went as a delegate to the state convention. I got trained to do that from a local church, actually in Fort Worth, near your area. And it changed my life. All I did was put a stinking sign for a candidate in my front yard, and the rest is history 15 years later, right? So you have no idea the door that you might walk through when it comes to getting educated politically, how it might impact your life and how you might be a blessing to the people, even in the political movement. We're doing so many things outside of just doing outreach to the body of Christ, actually sowing into the lives of elected officials and government leaders. I mean, Matt, if you told me when COVID hit that we would be sending spiritual care packages to every elected official in Texas, or doing prayer calls to get our elected officials praying, and letting people see that, I would have said, no, that's not part of our mission. But what we've discovered is people in authority, right, such as yourself, need ministry too. I had a state representative call me, a friend of yours, the other day, thanking me for a book that I just wrote on getting over bitterness, unforgiveness, and offenses. And it's just such an honor to serve, even within activists or the political movement. How do you think we're changing the spiritual atmosphere, I guess, in the political Texas movement?
Well, what I love about y'all is it's nonpartisan. It doesn't matter if you've got an R by your name, a D by your name, if you had an I or an L or a
Right.
G, whatever it is, Christians Engage is going to engage with you. And I think that speaks volumes because people don't see it as a political movement. They see it as a personal movement. And so some of my best friends in the House are Democrats. I'm a Republican. They're Democrats. But it doesn't matter. They need spiritual nourishment and spiritual encouragement as much as I do, and they crave that. And they want that just like I do. And so I think that's really how Christians Engage is really going to make its mark. Is, hey, if you're an elected official, we know you need prayer. We know you need wisdom and discernment. We may not agree on this issue or that. We may agree on this issue or that, but we're here to minister to you with seeking nothing in return, which is, as you know, rare in politics. Usually if I'm giving you something, there's something that I may want or something I may need from you. You're just doing it as a ministry. And I think that'll speak volumes to the members it already has. And I think that'll continue to pay huge dividends for the effectiveness of the ministry, because you don't care what their label is. You just care that they're a person and that they need some prayer and they need some help, and that'll go a long way. And so I applaud what y'all are doing, and I appreciate what you're doing, adapting in this way, like you said, for these spiritual care packages, because that's going to speak volumes more than anything else would. When somebody at the Capitol gets a package from somebody that they don't know that's praying for them and helping them, that's going to make them say, I may need to reach out to these folks because I need a lot more prayer on these other areas of life as well. So I think it's huge. I think it's going to have a huge impact.
Well, even my state representative is not of the party of my choice. But last session when you guys were getting sworn in, I went by her office and said, hey, and wanted to introduce myself because we were running on opposite sides of different tickets at the same time. And I wanted to see her face to face and let her know that I was praying for her and her family and was believing for the best and that she would be hearing from me to her office. And I wanted her to see me face to face. She was one of the ones that sent me a letter thanking me for our little care package. So I think we underestimate the ability of building relationships and how we can have an impact just as citizen lobbyists, without a better term, to our elected officials, regardless of party. And it starts with relationships and actually, trust, right? That we're going to tell them what we believe without, offensive language or, speaking down to them or blasting them on social media or that kind of stuff. Anyway.
Well, and even if you just look at it practically, now you've got a access and invitation to talk with somebody who doesn't agree with you on issues, to be able to speak into them and give them a perspective, to where if you'd come to them and said, oh, you're just this or that, or use harsh language towards them, you would have never built that relationship. And
Exactly.
As well as I do, that those relationships are so important. I crave people who don't think like I do, because it gives me a different perspective. So as many people that I can have a nice, civil, reasonable discussion with who don't believe the way I do, I love that, because it's ironing, sharpening iron. And because of the way you've approached it and the way you've handled that in a ministry way instead of just a pure political way, now that's giving you an ability to speak into even other issues, which could maybe help her change her mind on some things going forward, which is invaluable.
You never know.
That's right.
So speaking on that, Matt, the last question, we'll close this up for everybody. I know I could sit here for another hour, as I know you don't have time, but how can one person make a difference? We're starting a political activism class for Christians July 21st. It'll be 8 hours of intense training over the course of a month or so, where I'm actually going to give them assignments they're going to have to do. So we're building on-ramps for Christians to the political world, but how can one person make a difference in Texas right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you Google how one vote made a difference, you'll get example after example of election after election that was literally decided by 1 or 2 votes. And so just in the most real basic sense, your vote always matters. You just never know what's going to happen. So you getting involved in just registering to vote and vote could literally sway an entire election. So that's one way. But the other way is, I know for me, when I finally won in 2012, I avoided a runoff by 42 votes. And I had some volunteers who stood out at a poll every day for 2 weeks, getting helping me out. I guarantee you, had they not done that for that 2 weeks, I would not have gotten the 42 votes I needed to avoid a runoff. And so I give them credit, literally give them credit for helping me win my election. Just a sweet couple who's incredible. I always say, you guys won my election for me. And so, because they were just involved and they were active. So no matter what you're doing, if you're block walking, if you're hosting meet and greets, if you're registering people to vote, if you're voting yourself, if you're taking 3 of your friends to go vote, that's another thing. Maybe your friends aren't politically active like you weren't before. You start taking 3, 4, 5 friends to the poll. Not only are you getting them involved, but you're kind of tripling your vote, quadrupling your vote, because they're going to say, okay, Bunny, I don't know these people as well as you do. How should I vote? And you're like, well, here's my recommendation. So now you voted 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 times. We've seen a lot of precinct chairs do that. They hand out a list of who they ought to vote for. If you're not a precinct chair and there's not one in your area, look at doing that if you get bold enough, because then you can go through and give a slate. So your one vote now multiplies to 50 or 100. So there's so many ways that one person can have an impact here in Texas. And then I would encourage you, once the session starts, or even before the session starts, find out who your state representative, state senator are. Go sit down and talk with them and tell them what's important to you. Because I've had my mind changed, or my perspective changed on issues just by talking to people who lived in my district, because they had a passion for something, had knowledge about something. So get to know your elected officials, because that's another way you as a person, because sometimes a thing will come for my committee. I'll say, yeah, but I had this person back home who told me this about that, and now I've got some knowledge on it. So get involved in the process, get to know your elected officials, and you can have a huge difference as one person. And then my last thing I'll say is, don't put all your hope in politics either. Even though Buddy and I are both political animals, everybody seems to get so disappointed when something doesn't go their way. And I always tell them, the Supreme Court just came down with what I think are pretty bad from a jurisprudence perspective, some cases that could have big ramifications for society and culture, and people get so dejected. But I keep telling them, don't put your faith or your hope in Washington, D.C. Don't put it in the Supreme Court. Don't put it in your state legislators in Austin. Your job isn't to affect outcomes. That's God's. And so I always tell people there's a difference between disappointment and discouragement. Disappointment is just a natural human reaction when things don't go your way. Everybody's going to be disappointed. When I lost, I was disappointed. I'm sure you were disappointed for all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into it. But discouragement is when you take your eyes off the sovereignty of God and start to get depressed or dejected. And that's never good, because he's just as good and in control when your person wins as when they lose. And so don't put all your hope and faith in the political process. Be involved and engaged, because it's critical to our culture. But if you win, great. If you lose, great. Just keep plugging at it, and don't feel like your message has been rejected or your work has been in vain. It just means you're working for the next thing. So just keep moving forward on it.
That is the truth. I mean, if we don't keep our eyes on Jesus, we will get sideswiped in this political movement and never be happy, because we're always going to feel unfulfilled, because only Jesus is perfect, folks.
That's right.
Only Jesus is perfect. With that, I have written some books, mini books, one on John 17, the heart cry of Jesus for us. And it's all about biblical unity. And then also, during to the end, my newest book about my political race, Overcoming Offenses, Bitterness, and Unforgiveness. I think every person needs this. We're actually going to be handing these out to activists that take the pledge at a state convention coming up in July. So we're going to be sowing into the political movement and believing God for the money to do that. So with that, we've got a couple things going on, Matt. Thank you so much for your time. We are doing a political activism class July 21st. You can sign up for that on our website. Go to our events page, and it's only $25. I mean, this first inaugural class, we just want to get as many people in as possible in 2020. So join us for that. We're going to be talking about issues from a biblical perspective. We're going to be talking about political parties. We're going to be talking about citizen lobbying. We're going to be talking about advocating for legislation. We're going to be talking about our heart in the political movement. And then we're going to be giving assignments and having you go do some stuff and do some research and choose some candidates and go do something and then report back and then talk about how this is changing your life. So if you've never done anything politically, now's the time to get educated and get an on-ramp, and we want to provide that for you. Anybody who gives $10 or more gets the book of their choice to Christians Engaged. So just go online to christiansengaged.org and give us some money so that we can keep doing this and sowing into people's lives. And then we look forward to seeing you all around the state. Invite us to your church. And thank you again so much, Matt Krause from Fort Worth. We so appreciate you, and thank you for being our friend and for standing up for biblical values in Austin.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for all you're doing. It's an honor to be associated with y'all. Look forward to working with you for a long time to come.